Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The movie podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
Welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We have a fantastic show this week with 4 brand new reviews, 2 new in theaters, and 2 brand new for streaming. This week on the show, now in theaters, Ghostface is back, only this time he takes on the big city in the next installment to the horror franchise in Scream 6. An emotionless, hot-tempered basketball coach is ordered by the court to coach a team of players with intellectual disabilities and learns together this team can go further than he ever imagined in Champions. Now available to rent, buy, or stream now. Break a promise, pay a price to some goblins in the new horror film Unwelcome. And finally, a rock and roll star's life comes crashing down and he must fight his past demons to realize his childhood ambition of becoming a preacher in Southern Gospel. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows to watch, a roar and a bursting of flame. The Movie Wire podcast.
There it is.
We just need people like me.
Podcast for hot and
The
trendy movies.
Wire.
And here we go.
A former minor league basketball coach is ordered by the court to manage a team of players with intellectual disabilities. He soon realizes that despite his doubts, together this team can go further than they ever imagined in the new movie Champions.
Remember Marcus Markovich?
You gotta make that!
Well, he got fired.
Marcus, get off the court.
That wasn't nice. Nothing but bad news for the Iowa Stallions.
What an idiot.
Mr. Markovich, I will offer you community service. Coaching adults with intellectual disabilities.
Your Honor, we're talking Whoa. No boo-boo words.
Okay, fellas, we're gonna do a simple ball handling exercise.
My girlfriend loves those.
It's impossible to coach these guys.
You don't have to turn them into the Lakers. They just need to feel like a team.
We're gonna need some help.
You're getting a player off the injured list. Welcome to the team, Cosentino. What's with the boogie board?
You do you, I do me, okay? Where do you got this guy?
He just showed up one day.
This is my sister, Alice. You wanna do copper karaoke with us?
I don't like
I'm getting back down.
You're back it up again.
You're never gonna keep me down.
You know the game better than anybody.
You gotta defend over here.
You got to learn to build relationships.
I'm new to all this.
Yeah, can tell.
Hey, we got next.
Don't make me say it. Make you say what? That's a boo-boo word.
We got next.
Coach, this doesn't feel right.
I should be coaching in the NBA.
Well, you never know where things could lead.
No doubt.
You can get this team to the Special Olympics finals. You might be ready to be back in the NBA.
We've been following your incredible story, Coach. Marcus is just one win away from qualifying for the regional tournament.
I don't know if you're brave or crazy.
Give me a hug, coach.
But I know this is your shot at being champions.
Girlfriend problems?
That was fun.
You were passable.
I don't have a girlfriend.
Makes sense.
Oh, what, am I that bad looking?
You know McConaughey.
Champions is a remake from the 2018 film of the same name from Spain. Now, I remember the original film getting a lot of talk around the Seattle Film Festival when it was screened back in 2018. It's one of those movies that I missed, but I ended up viewing it a year or so later. The original champions had heart, it had great performances, it gave us something to cheer for, and that was due to the chemistry and the production value. It was an absolutely fantastic movie. Now we get the American version of Champions that is now playing in a theater near you. Champion stars Woody Harrelson as Marcus, a passionate assistant basketball coach who is passionate about basketball and pretty much nothing else. Or at least that's what the movie tries to portray with the brief background and the discovery we get from Harrelson's character in the first act, before it rushes itself to jump into the meat and potatoes of the story, which the story is a pretty simplistic setup. A motionless assistant coach tries to overrule the head coach Phil, played by Ernie Hudson, in the middle of a basketball game. Coach Phil shuts his recommendations down, Marcus shoves Coach Phil, Phil gets drunk and drives into a park police car, and now he has been ordered by the court to coach a team of players with intellectual disabilities. Now it's a different spin and sport, but a familiar storyline and endgame to the Mighty Ducks. We all know what's gonna happen, and we all know the formula way too well. Going into a movie like this, everybody knows what kind of film we are going to get. But what moviegoers are looking for when they go into a film like this is something to inspire, something to bring a smile to our faces, a motivational coach speech for the big game. Now, our basketball team calls themselves the Friends, but we don't see a lot of interactions between the team members without the coach present to really dive into the discovery of the chemistry between each of them, which is a complete shame because every cast member of the basketball team, the Friends, is absolutely fantastic, except for one, but I will get into that in just 1 second. By the time we get into the third act, anytime the Friends are not seen on screen, I felt myself getting antsy because I really wanted more of the team. The way they act on the court is utterly engaging, and it is completely unfortunate that the filmmakers didn't know the treasures that they had, and they didn't deep dive into some of the character subplots to really show off how good our cast of players are. Outside of our basketball team, Champions is full of top-notch talent, including, again, Woody Harrelson, Always Sunny in Philadelphia's Caitlin Olsen as Harrelson's love interest, Alex, Ernie Hudson as Coach Phil, and Cheech Marin as the gym facilitator. This cast is a love letter to likability of what's on screen, and on paper, in theory, would have been a perfect mix. And all of them are likable, except our main character, Woody Harrelson. I love Woody Harrelson's work, and he usually knows how to pick his roles, but here he is completely out of his element. When he first meets the team, the Friends, he gives a natural persona that he doesn't want to be there against his will. But what we should see in a movie like this is a natural progression of him wanting to be there and establishing bonds with these players. And we do, on paper, with dialogue we can hear, but we get a feeling from his on-screen presence that somebody's standing next to him holding a gun to his head to be in this movie. It's a complete misfire and miscast. But I just can't poke fault at Harrelson. The progression of the movie rushes itself to give no time for the characters to interact, to truly give a believable relationship. It only slows itself down to present a joke or a funny situation, or it gives us a subplot of the love interest between Marcus and Alex. It really misses on structure and where the movie should spend most of its time. You can tell there's a lot put into post-production, and I'm sure that the editing team was hard at work to give a sense of emotion or fun. For example, you know how you smile or you laugh, and it can be contagious so the other person starts to laugh or smile as well. This was the strategy of the movie. I lost count on how many times the film cuts away from our team or the game they are playing just to show us an up-close shot of one of the characters smiling or laughing. The filmmakers wanted to give this artificial impression of laughing, smiling, hey, we're having fun. It's like when you watch America's Funniest Home Videos and it shows the audience smiling and laughing, even though the video they just showed you was cringy with an over-the-top voiceover. Champion shots of showing single characters smiling and laughing is so overused, and I started to play a game predicting how many times the camera was going to cut away from what's happening to a character laughing or smiling on screen. By the time we reached the climax, I was just waiting for the camera to zoom in on a miserable-looking Woody Harrelson. But this time, instead instead of seeing Woody Harrelson smile, he's smoking a cigarette and tells the cameraman, "For the love of God, stop filming me. I can't smile anymore." The transitions between these shots are not flawless, the editing is noticeably poor, as well as the music mix, where the non-vocal music backgrounds feel like it belongs in a PowerPoint presentation and builds no excitement leading up to the big game. Now, there is no question that this film has flaws, and is a polar opposite from the 2018 version when it comes to the relationship between the coach and the players. But the film does have its heart in the right place, it just has the wrong people handling it. It also adds moments of sweetness thanks to the rest of the cast minus Woody Harrelson. The only shining moment with Woody Harrelson is when we get into more dramatic emotional scenes. Harrelson seems to grasp his comfort zone here, and these dramatic scenes by comparison shows that he is in the wrong type of movie. But nevertheless, the dramatic scenes are well executed and will tug at your heartstrings. Champions is a failed attempt of a remake of a much better film. It takes everything that was so special and rushes the premise, takes the heart out of it, and leaves us with nothing to cheer for except for the amazing cast of players on The Friends. Even though a failed attempt, it does have moments that sparkle and shine, but a sports film without heart is like watching the Mighty Ducks fall through the ice within the first act of the movie, and then just watching the credits roll. I'm giving Champions 2 stars. Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out my reviews on previous episodes for movies that just became available to rent, buy, and stream now. Now available: Apex Predator, high on cocaine, out of its mind in Cocaine Bear, which snorted its way to 3 stars. A group of friends made it their lifelong mission to go to the Super Bowl and meet NFL star Tom Brady, which scored a touchdown with 3.5 stars. No One Disappears Without a Trace in the mystery reality thriller Missing, which found itself 3 stars. It's Magic Mike's Last Dance. Again, in Magic Mike's Last Dance, which stripped down to 2 stars. And finally, A Choice to Save Your Family or Save Humanity in the new M. Night Shyamalan film Knock at the Cabin, which opened its doors to 3 stars. You can find those reviews on my previous episodes, and just a reminder, if you haven't yet, make sure you hit follow or subscribe, and don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, and make sure you follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. Now it's that time of year again where in the Seattle area we have the Snohomish Film Festival coming up. You can now submit your film into the festival by going to www.filmfreeway.com/Snohomish Film Festival. It's going to be a great year and I cannot wait to see your movie. In the next installment, the survivors of the Ghostface killings leave Woodsboro behind to start a fresh chapter in New York City in Scream 6.
Please help us. Just down here.
What's in line here, girl? You got a problem here, guy?
I had this secret. There's a darkness inside of me. It followed me here. And it's gonna keep coming for us. We share a certain history. This isn't like any other Ghostface.
What is this place?
A shrine.
We've got to lure him in.
We execute him.
Hello?
Let's play a game.
You know you're like the 10th guy to try this, right? It never works out for the dipshit in the mask.
Maybe. But there's never been one like me, Gail. I'm something different.
That's why I'm gonna shoot you in the head.
You want me. So let's finish this.
Guys?
Do you remember that time when Jason took Manhattan in Friday the 13th 8? The Movie Wire remembers, where the Friday the 13th franchise was starting to fizzle down and before reboots became the new norm, the filmmakers needed to take Jason in a drastic setting change away from Camp Crystal Lake. What the final result was exactly that of the same movie, just in a different setting that really didn't take full advantage of that setting. Now we have Scream that follows the same beat only a couple sequels sooner, and almost plays like a nod to Jason Takes Manhattan in my opinion. Scream 6 follows our survivors from Scream 5, Sam and Tara Carpenter, played by Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega, along with brother and sister Mindy and Chad, played by Jasmine Savoy Brown and Mason Gooding. I went into Scream 6 with a grain of salt given how fast it came out, just following its predecessor Scream 2022, but at the same time, the Scream films are usually an entertaining time at the movies, and it's fun while you're watching it on screen before you leave the theater, because after the theater, you're gonna start tearing it apart, and then you're not having that much fun. But part of the fun of the Scream films is following along and attempting to figure out the killer. This was part of the fun in the first two Scream films, and maybe the third one to an extent. As we got into the two that followed Scream 3, this is where we lost a little bit of the fun trying to find out who the killer is, where we start to stretch the motive, where the killer could end up being anybody, and this is where the filmmakers takes away from the mystery to just have the audience wonder how they're going to stretch the relationship to this killer into the original cast. The killer now could be anybody. It could be the best friend of your mother's pharmacist, who is the father of your ex-girlfriend from high school, who you dumped for her best friend. The problem we have with the Scream films is that it's consistently adding more and more characters to the point it makes it almost impossible to guess the killer. And I felt that in the 2022 Scream, even though it was a fun watching in moment. When we take away hope of solving the mystery of the killer, that's when the audience really focuses on how the characters act or what they do, which adds a laser focus to the audience for us to really predict who's going to die next, and that's what makes a slasher film predictable. And this is where Scream went outside of the norm to call out itself on a lot of these mistakes. And as we start to get into more and more sequels, this is where we start to get away from what the charm of the first two were. But with that said, Scream 6 adds a freshness and is honestly quite smart for being the sixth go-around. It truly identifies the fact it's the sixth installment, and they can't do the same thing they have done in the previous Scream films, especially if they're going to make it harder for the audience to predict the killer. It brings nods to what the second Scream film did with the sequels. This time it makes it about requels or reboot rules. The original sequel rules in Scream 2 was presented by Randy Meeks from Scream 2, played by Jamie Kennedy. This go-around is presented by relatives Mindy Meeks Martin, played again by Jasmine Savoy Brown, who I think was completely miscast from Scream 2022, and it shows even more so in Scream 6. Meeks Martin goes on to explain the rules of the requel or reboot, just like what we got from Jamie Kennedy's character from Scream 2. But the problem we have is that she doesn't make the role her own. She tries to mimic Kennedy's mantra too much where it becomes just cringy, and a miss for what could have been a great passing of the torch to a nostalgic scene. Now, Scream 6 does add a small clique of characters along with some returning character surprises with the normal added returning characters. With the added returning characters, they are very cleverly placed where it doesn't seem to be too out of place. And the movie was smart to not overdo the returning Gale Weathers in this go-around, but rather let the audiences really start to get intimate with the returning cast from Scream 2022. Now, with one of the most likable characters from the franchise missing in action in this one, and I will leave the name out of it for those that haven't seen the previous film, the film had to have a character of likability and authority, which is now Detective Bailey, played by Dermot Mulroney, who does a fantastic job on likability, and he does have some great inclusion lines to gather all of our characters together. The filmmakers even double down on the detail of the kills and gore. Now, when it comes to keeping with the nostalgic feel of the films, the filmmakers have a clever way of balancing out less screen time with the nostalgic characters and add almost legacy clues and lines that gives the audience a sense of satisfaction without banking completely on the characters of the past. The biggest thing the film does well and brings it back to its roots from the original Wes Craven version is that they bring a focus around the relationship of the characters and not just the pawns placed in a horror film ready to be killed. Writers James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick and directors Matt Bertinelli Open and Tyler Gillett learned from some of the shortcomings shortcomings of the character development and character chemistry from last year's Scream to really higher the stakes and bring a focus onto the characters. If you pay attention to a lot of the details and hints they throw at you, you might be able to piece together at least a pretty close theory going into the climax. By the time you get towards the climax, I found myself disappointed that the film was ending. I was having a good time with it, and this is due in part mostly to the engaging chemistry with the cast of characters. And it's not necessarily the killings and Ghostface that keep this film going, but the actual engaging chemistry. And its top-notch pacing compared to the other Screams, it takes it a little level higher, and we go back to the pacing of the first and the second one. Where the film struggles for me is a bunch of plot holes of motive that I can't really go into depth here due to spoilers, but I will say that the chemistry is so good between Sam and Tara, Mindy and Chad within the first act of the movie, but when we add more characters to the circle, I would have loved to see a bigger effort into getting to know these other characters and see them interact, especially with Chad's roommate Ethan, played by Jack Champion. Chad and Ethan, we know are roommates, but only because we are told. We don't get any real one-on-one time with these added characters, so it's hard to file an opinion about them. We get the chemistry from the returning cast that we should have gotten in the previous films, but no new chemistry from the added cast we get in Scream 6. To be a solid story, it shouldn't take 2 movies for us to like the characters we see on screen, but again, I might be too analytical when it comes to a slasher film like this, and focusing too much on the quote-unquote story. The Scream franchise has become a soap opera of horror franchises, but one thing you can bet whether it's good or bad after you walk out of the theater is that in the moment they are fun to watch. Scream 6 is way smarter than it should be for being its 6th installment and is now tied for my 3rd favorite Scream film. I just hope they don't directly copy the Friday the 13th formula and by 10 we find our Scream cast in space. But only time will tell. I'm giving Scream 6 3 stars. Now, there's a podcast that I listen to that always seems to ruin my diet, but let me tell you that it is worth it. As well as satisfying my sweet tooth to true crime stories in the kitchen, it's a podcast that I absolutely love, and that's the Sugar Coated Murders podcast with the lovely Karen and Ann. Make sure you check them out. The link will be in the description of this episode. But let's hear from Karen and Ann now.
Hey, Ann Barner. Hey, Karen Beatty. We need a promo, like where we talk about what we do on our podcast.
On our Sugar Coated Murder podcast? Like how we love to bake and talk about murder?
That's what we need to talk about.
There you go.
I think we've talked about it. Y'all find us on all your favorite listening apps.
Stay sweet.
And don't murder.
Because if you kill people,
we will talk about you.
When a rock and roll star's life comes crashing down, he must fight his past demons to realize his childhood ambition of becoming a preacher in Southern Gospel.
It's getting hot, real hot.
You got a gift, son. It's in your blood.
My dad always told me that nothing can distance you from God's love. And boy, I tried. You ever feel like you know the man you want to be, but you're just not strong enough? Every day.
Preacher boy.
Just trying to start over, I
don't think they allow my good friend Jack Daniels in church.
You're beautiful, inside and out.
I've never met someone like you.
When I was certain I lost a chance to love someone as special as you. A year ago, I was high on cocaine. I know we don't talk about this kind of stuff in church, but I don't know why. I was tired. I was cold.
I've been watching you since your so-called conversion. Rock and roll. It's an infection.
You're gonna try and tell me you've never made one mistake.
Not a one! You're finished.
Our life was stolen from us.
Look, I'm fighting for our dream.
At the bottom of a well, I can see the light. I just can't reach it.
You're my best friend. I need you.
I
I got lost somewhere along the way, but you kept loving me.
A lost cause now is found. Never give up on the dream that God has given you. All because of your love. You still love me.
Here is another based on true story where the psychedelic era was a prominent surrounding in redemption and faith. A couple weeks ago, I covered another true story around this era called Jesus Revolution, starring Kelsey Grammer. Southern Gospel is based on a true story of Samuel Allen, a rock star from the 1960s who falls into drugs and alcohol when an accident makes him rediscover his faith and dream of becoming a preacher. You know, maybe just once we can have a studio find a religious true story to base its movie on surrounding religion and faith where we don't have the main character always end up in a drunken car accident. More recently, again, we have had Jesus Revolution, Father Stew, and now Southern Gospel. You cannot tell me there isn't one motivational true story out there that doesn't involve the character almost getting killed in a drunken accident. I'm sure there are hundreds to thousands of stories about faith where it doesn't wait until the sudden death to realize its faith. Even though Southern Gospel is yet another true story that has this element, it was at least refreshing not to focus on a whole movie surrounding a drunken accident or a life of drugs, and uses other character motivations to send its messaging. But between the movies surrounding faith and redemption that have come out between last year and now, Southern Gospel is hands down one of the best executed, written, and balanced of them all. Which the biggest surprise was coming from newcomer writer-director Jeffrey A. Smith, whose previous works are just over 50 music videos, and a short film from 2012 entitled The Bride, a love story. And this is something that I don't say often, and those of you that listen to me know I don't say this often about new writers and directors on theatrical releases, is that Jeffrey A. Smith convinced me that he has been directing for decades. And to my amazement, Smith has a lot of music and composition background, but nothing but music videos to direct. Smith has a real natural eye of gathering a shot to really pull in the audience into a conversation on screen and capturing numerous money shots of emotion within our characters. He is a pure example of having the exact vision of the story in his head while writing his screenplay. While yes, the script can come off as cliche from time to time, but it's balanced out perfectly by the strong performances and the engaging use of inclusion of the camera. Southern Gospel stars Max Eric for more notable TV shows such as The Young and the Restless and Dome as our preacher rock star Samuel Allen. Alongside Eric, we have Gary Weeks from Spider-Man Homecoming and No Way Home, who plays Samuel's preacher father Joe. And lastly, Caitlin Nacon as Samuel's love interest Julie. Now, most of the cast is fairly unknown with a ton of random TV gigs, but I can say that most won't be unknown for long, especially when it comes to Mac Eric, who is electrifying on screen and will be one to watch in the coming years. He reminded me of a more subtle Austin Butler in his performance that comes across believably injured, but wants to do the right thing, but loses the path how. It's a completely humble performance, and it's not only a humble performance, but a charming one that when Eric's reciting Smith's dialogue, he's believable as not only just a pastor, but as a human. The special thing about Southern Gospel is that there is a lot of religious talk in the movie, and it delivers it without it seeming like it's slamming it down your throat. It comes across as a natural conversation with the film's main intent is to motivate the follow your dreams ideology most of the time. Even as I wait for the climax to receive the God is good speech that tends to be predictable in a lot of these movies surrounding religion, it takes more of the neutral ground by yes, still taking on the religion topic, but also giving supporting facts of the acts of good without over-talking the religion aspect. And it supports it by a lot of given plot points and evidence of the fact that it's never too late to follow your dreams. The film's execution and messaging to reach multiple audiences, not just that of the religious community, is spot on, and it can be enjoyed by both that are religious and those that are not. It gives messaging that is universal that will cater to all different types of audiences. Southern Gospel took me by surprise on many aspects, but the one thing that negatively surprised me was the lack of music where the movie surrounds itself around a musician. This is even more disappointing because Eric's voice is truly mesmerizing, along with the music when it's performed is memorable. Now, of course, Southern Comfort isn't a perfect movie. It does have its flaws, and most of those flaws are seen during the second half of the film. We tend to get a little off focus where the film feels to be a little off balance, where we get a lot of time spent with the characters in the first half of the movie, and the film tries in the second half to play catch-up with itself, where it fast-forwards through what feels like key pivotal moments in Samuel Adams' life. And by doing so, we lose a little bit of the human connection to Alan's life because we're not there to experience it except for a fast-forward cutscene. We also have our villain-like character T.L. Whitmore, played by Justin Leake, who is a little overwritten in cliche lines and plays like a slimy music producer, but is in charge of the church branches. T.L. also has a grudge against the Allen family that really isn't explained, and Justice is just a fun character to look at on screen, but he doesn't match the acting styles and tone to the other characters we see. Southern Gospel on paper is pure proof of the saying that it's so crazy it might just work, given new writer-director Jeffrey A. Smith and the cast of rookie theatrical talent on screen. It's a movie about a preacher that doesn't preach to the audience, but rather when you walk out of the theater, you're motivated to just be a decent, nice human being. Southern Gospel is a crowd pleaser that the moviegoers need right now. I'm giving Southern Gospel 3 stars. It gets so hard to keep track and even have time to read all the trending topics on the web. Now there's a new app to help with all of those problems. Newsly is an audio app for iOS and Android. It picks up web articles about the most trending topics on the web at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice. For the first time in the history of the internet, the entire web becomes listenable. Browse articles from topics you choose and start playing. You can follow any topic as specific as you like, from sports, science, to Bitcoin. You can even follow Kardashian. It will find you the latest articles and read them to you out loud. And guess what? They have podcasts as well. Explore trending podcasts from over 50 countries. The Movie Wire is now a featured podcast on the Newsly app. Download and use Newsly for free now. The link will be in the description of this episode. You can also use one of my promo codes that you will find in the description as well to get you a 1-month free premium subscription. Stop scrolling, start listening, download Newsly today. Married couple Maya and Jamie escape their urban nightmare to the tranquility of Ireland, only to discover violent and murderous goblins lurking in the woods at the foot of their new garden in the new horror film Unwelcome.
We've been gifted this beautiful house.
We live here. Can you believe it?
Maeve wanted to keep the place in your family, Jamie.
We really appreciate the house.
Well, then you know. It's got a hole in the roof.
The Whelans, they'll do a good job.
Jamie, Maya, you just carry on with your day as if we weren't here.
There is one thing I need to show you, and it's a little bit peculiar. Every evening before sunset, she'd leave a blood offering here.
Sorry, did you say blood? For who?
For the red caps. They'll need feeding. They'll be hungry.
Can I get in my own house, please?
You own it, dear.
How many times have the English come to this country and told us what's ours is now theirs?
They need to know their place.
Tim! What did you leave out tonight?
Oh, shoot.
You can't miss a single day.
Hello? Is anyone there?
I can't be scared. Not in my own house.
Don't leave your missus alone with the lads.
Help me!
They'll need feeding. Every day. Every day. Every day. Every day. Every day. Every day.
We just came here for some peace.
Unwelcome stars Hannah John Kamen from Tomb Raider, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Ready Player One. And also stars Douglas Booth from Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, Jupiter Ascending, and Noah, who are a married couple that escapes their city lives after being left a home in Ireland. Now, Unwelcome is a film that the audio doesn't match the video. From the vulgar dialogue, the extremely uncomfortable written situations mixed with a lightly toned fairy tale. The movie almost gives a mix of Straw Dogs along with Gremlins, with a touch of the added tone of Gremlins too. And even at times, given the mannerisms of the goblins, reminded me of 1987's film Munchies. Now, if we take a look at the marketing for this film, from the movie poster to even to the extent the movie trailer, it may leave to question what kind of movie this is targeted for. The movie is rated R, but after watching it is not necessarily for the violence of the goblins, but rather for some other situations. And these other situations that are much more terrifying than the goblins we see on screen. The biggest noticeable thing when watching Unwelcome is the bright and friendly tone when we have Maya and Jamie go to Ireland. The tone stays light and bright even when there's a sense of danger, with only really changing when there's a hint of the goblins, and the fog dream-like states that we get a fable feel, which took me a second viewing to actually appreciate the attempt at the contrasting tones between the bright scenes and the fog dream-like state. The tone keeps a contrast to the prior life of which Maya and Jamie lived and symbolizes that darkness can even come during the light. Director John Wright had all the right technical elements of the story to make it something special, and most likely had some budget constraints, and you can tell by the look of the goblins. And to an extent, it is a very smart move to give very little screen time to our goblins and letting the audience use their imaginations to enhance their sense of danger. But limited budget or not, I will always love this type of storytelling, to give opportunity to tell a story along with keeping the audience guessing and building up the suspense. But this only works if the payoff in the climax is there, and unfortunately the payoff is not there, and it goes into another tone change of almost an attempt at the chaos effect with creatures that matches even below the quality of 2009's Aliens in the Attic. And it comes across completely laughable, and it seems intentional, but after 2 viewings I don't know what's worse, the fact that it was intentional or unintentional. The movie doesn't make it clear, and this makes it so it seems that I might be wrong about John Wright's vision, and it throws the movies off, and it makes me question if John Wright's vision of this movie was intentional or unintentional, or if he realizes at the very last minute after seeing the quality of these creatures to spin it as a fun farce romp, which would have been a mistake and a lack of confidence in his direction, to go all in and maybe cut back on some of the ridiculous dialogue that these creatures speak. When we hear these goblins talk, that again is a creative mistake. It ruins the lack of credibility of within the last 15-20 minutes of the movie. With everything that happens leading up to the climax, there is a lot of good stuff, but the climax is the main problem we have when the goblin danger finally presents itself. John Wright slaps the audience across the face with silliness instead of utilizing the subplot suspense that he has spent so much time building up. The suspense that Wright builds up is truly felt, and treats this town and setting as a safe haven for Maya and Jamie. The characters they meet in the village is actually great chemistry, and it gives us a little bit of safety mixed in with the suspense that the characters go through. These are all great elements that Wright puts into his movies. If you cut out the goblins from this movie and focused on the warming town and the non-goblin conflict that Maya and Jamie go through, this would have been a completely engaging movie by itself. But we feel the goblins are just thrown in to give a further far-fetched conflict that isn't believable, and even though the climax is entertaining and in my opinion unintentionally funny, and leads to unwanted crescendos from suspense to laughter, and it happens in a heartbeat where my head tilted almost instantly to the side that you could hear the swish of my neck, along with the creaking of my eyes being squinted to the screen of what the film was turning into. And it is a head scratcher that we suffer an identity crisis, but it only presents itself in the climax of the movie. And then we question the credibility of the rest of the movie on what it really wants to be. The climax acts as a distraction because our minds are actually rethinking the things we saw in the movie and trying to put the pieces together of what the filmmakers are trying to do here. Unwelcome has the elements to have a cult following down the road. It has enough elements to entertain and even laugh during the climax. And I really think that the writers Mark Stay and John Wright just had a drinking bender while writing the ending and never went back to double check it. But with the talented cast, they make us believe what they are trying to sell us 90% of the time. Unwelcome is a completely unbalanced film experience that I can appreciate a lot of what the film tries to do, and with that attempt at least gives us a decently suspenseful ride for most of the runtime. But once the goblins get involved, it becomes more of a farce than horror. If it wasn't for the unexpected suspenseful subplot and the performances, Unwelcome's title should have been taken as a literal message to the viewer before buying tickets, renting, or buying on streaming platforms. I'm giving Unwelcome 2 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. Until next week, do me a favor, make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film, and support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at Movie Wire Show or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.